So you're filming yourself now?
Well, I'm going to be trying to film you, but I don't think it's going to work.
That technologically doesn't seem that strong.
No, but you know what? What you say is the most important thing. The sponge is...
The sponge is a pretty cool device.
Yeah, no, sponge is great.
So with your filming, I mean, how many hours of footage have you got?
Well, I've been trying to be their press person.
The oppressed.
Their press person.
Oh, the press person.
So because all the filmmakers that come around Occupy LSX are making their own documentaries, and I just felt like Occupy LSX needed somebody to make them their stuff.
Right.
You know, and so that's what I've been trying to do.
And where do you come from, Inka?
I'm complicated.
I don't mean sort of geographically. I mean sort of in this country, or you know, what makes you rock up?
I'm Maltese Australian.
Ilostia al Madonna.
Ilal.
I love Malta. I've been going to Malta like all my whole life. All my best friends in the world are Maltese.
Well,
Sabiha.
Yeah, grazie. Intico. Anyway, whatever. So, you know,
Fantastic.
blah, blah, blah.
Maltese.
And I'm Australian as well. And I've lived in Malta for the last 3 years. And I work in Israel and Palestine. And I believe in spiritual awareness. And so this Occupy LSX is about spiritual...
So did you come from Malta to here?
Yeah.
To help film?
No, I came from Malta to here to see someone. And then when Occupy LSX happened while I was here, I decided to stay. Because a tent is, after all, cheap rent.
Right.
I can't afford to live in a tent here. And so I can't afford to do this work. But there's no income coming in while I'm here.
Wow.
Yeah.
What part of Malta?
São Paulo Bahar.
Right.
And then I ended up in Msida.
Right.
Floriana. Hamruna Floriana is where I'm from.
Okay.
Yeah.
My parents live in Portomasso, in St Julian's.
Actually, I was brought up in Pachaville.
Okay, which is lovely.
Yeah, but I say where my parents are from because I thought you were being Maltese. So,
yeah, right. I can't speak Maltese.
Yeah, right.
I can say 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Tree. That's what Maltese say.
Anyway. So Portomasso was built right in front of where I live.
Right.
You know those block of flats that are right in front of...
No, I went to the Cavalieri Hotel when I was like 10.
So that's where I...
Oh, fantastic. That's very funny.
That is funny.
Okay. So I have another question. So, and this is something that I need to know the answer to. What is an investment banker?
Crazy.
What do you think an investment banker is? Because I'm very confused by the definition of it.
All right. My understanding, and I don't have any understanding of what an investment banker is, my absolute guess, not even an educated guess, is that it's somebody who uses the bank's money and invests it in relatively gambling schemes that are legalized, so stock exchange.
Legalized gambling.
Legalized gambling.
Okay.
And hopes for the best.
It's not a bad answer, I think. Legalized gambling is probably.
Yeah.
Huh? I'm trying to think what else. And do you? So you're. It's not. Anger's probably not the right word. You're. What a better word than anger. Your sort of communications are directed towards who? Is it the city? Is it the government? Is it investment bankers? Or, is it institutional? Is it global? What are we trying to change here?
Okay,
That's what I guess I'm getting
I guess my personal take on this would be trying to stir up people to stop allowing other people to make decisions for them like holistically. So the mess that we're in now, as far as I can tell, is because corporations control our government.
Right.
And that's kind of not aimed at investment bankers, but that's the mess that we got ourselves in. So as for the middle-aged and older folk of our population, they got us in this mess.
Right.
We're responsible for this mess. And so I'm actually...
We're all sort of complicit, aren't we? We're all in it together, or not?
Well, things came up, but also bad press. Sorry, Madam Guardian. But I really feel the press being so freaking lazy with what they choose to cover and being in the pockets of governments and of government leaders when it comes to wars, right? Because that's how it seems they make money, and of laws that change so that corporations can end up controlling our democracy. The press is, to me, vilely lazy in the way that they portray things that are going on. But I do see that
are you talking about in terms of exposing corporate wrongdoing, or is that what you're talking about? Because you said
corporate and government wrongdoing. Both, because it's intertwined as far as I can tell. But I'm here, unlike maybe George, and my aim is about the spiritual aliveness of us to say no, that this is not good, and to write those letters to the MPs, because there were systems in place for the people to have their say, and we just didn't bother, as far as I can tell.
Right.
And I don't think England is any different. Also, I mean, my experience comes from Australia, but England, I think, has
Australia, America,
same.
any Western capitalistic
Yes,
society
yes.
operates along the same lines.
Yeah, where we dived, lots of activists are now people who simply educate themselves on the computer. That's it. That's what they call activism, by going tap, tap, tap on a computer and not getting off their bums and into the cold or into anywhere to let their voices be heard. And a computer is easy to ignore. There's no passion in talking, in seeing an email. So that's actually my aim, is to stir up people. And investment bankers will hopefully follow. They're people too, right? And you hopefully occupy the conscience is where I'm at.
Well, I think one of the problems of investment bankers is that actually they do an astonishing amount of philanthropic work, right? It's just that they're appalling about letting the rest of the world know about it.
Okay.
In other words, they kind of do it quite quietly. And have always done it quietly, and actually I think they need to be a little bit more public in their profile, in terms of not necessarily the things that they're starting to do now, but the things that they have always done, which they've never mentioned. And again, there's an argument that sort of George has that says that they shouldn't have the money that they have to be able to do what they did anyway.
Unfortunately, I'm not I'm not that well versed, but I believe that the fundamental system of how bankers make money is bad. And so the money that comes to the philanthropic part of it is something that I don't have all that much respect for.
Yeah, he said the same. That's interesting.
I do respect that you do it. And like the big gazillions of money that goes to charity and NGOs comes from banks. I know that.
Not all of it, but
a lot of it
some.
does. The big sums come from banks and come from very rich people who have made their money in a way that is usually,
So what do you think about something like the
corruption.
Gates Foundation, or Warren Buffett giving all of his money to charity, and Bill Gates giving 90% of his money to the Gates Foundation?
I don't know enough about that to comment.
Well, they earned it a different way. That's all I'm saying. Or Bill Gates earned it through selling computers.
That's right.
Is he allowed to? Is he part of that system, or
Well,
is he?
Bill Gates then, with the computer part, then there's possibly another issue with computers, in that a lot of money that's generated from computers comes from the military industry. So again, it's possibly quite poisoned money as well. But
So what is unpoisoned money?
well, unpoisoned money is,
Farming.
well, it's fair enough for you to ask, and I am a little uncomfortable about talking about this, because I feel like our belief that the system can be changed and can be better shouldn't be ridiculed by the fact that I don't have, that I'm not super educated in these things.
I don't think there's an answer. I don't think it's about education. There's not a simple answer to the question.
The feeling I have is something that I believe all of us have. We have a people are conscious that things are wrong, but they don't know how to change it. And what Occupy is trying to do is communicate.
All right, here you go. We can let you off the hook for a while now. Thank you.
Occupy, thank you very much.
No, that's brilliant. Enjoy it. So how long have you been at The Guardian for?
3 years.
Yeah?
Before that, I was on the Daily Telegraph. Then Walker.
Where were you before that?
Mail on Sunday.
My wife's favourite.
Really?
Oh.
Before that, Evening Standard.
Before that, the Evening Standard.
Yeah,
Is there a
long time,
Feingold
long
that
time.
writes for the Evening Standard?
Who?
A Feingold?
Um,
No, maybe not.
the name rings a bell, but
That's my last name, but I'm sure I saw a journalist whose last name was the same. No.
They used to be. Yeah.
I have to say, The Guardian is not a paper that I...
You read.
Well, do you know what? It's not like I read it or I don't read it. It's just kind of never been around.
Yeah.
I don't mean I couldn't have bought it. I just...
No.
My dad used to read the Times and the Telegraph and kind of...
Well, yeah.
And I read the Times and the Telegraph and...
My dad used to read the Daily Express.
Funny enough, my newspapers are... I get the Sun and the FT, and I've done that for 25 years.
Yeah.
It's a good combination.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen? They're going to make you stand up in court?
Yeah,
Huh?
but the legal framework is very much skewed against the inclusion, the meaningful inclusion of any of the real issues that we're here for. Like the framing of the European Convention of Human Rights is very much about one's right in abstracto to assemble or to speak freely, versus the rights of local people not to be interfered with in any way. So it's very much set up so as not to include the wider issues. But so my job, and this is the reason I'm in the case, is to try and basically constrain the court to consider why we're there as essential to it. Because let's face it, it's a ridiculous process if you take Occupy London to court without considering why we're there, because, you know, if it weren't for the wider political issues, we would have no meaningful justification. You know? And like, okay, people can assemble and, you know, that's fine, but we're not there primarily in order to assemble. And this is, I think, the most important framing that we need to resist. And you see President Obama, Cameron, etc. There's a great quote from Cameron. He was in front of some select committee the other week, and I don't know the exact quote, but it was something like, well, you know, of course people have the right to protest, but that's totally separate from the issues under discussion, which were the economy and everything else, you know. And it's precisely not separate, that's the thing, you know, that as long as you frame the right to protest as almost this sort of fetishized consumer choice possibility, you completely miss the point of protest, that it's not there
I know, so often
in order to express a democratic right. That democratic right is there so that people can actually agitate for meaningful change, you know, and working against that. And like I say, Obama does exactly the same thing, you know. Well, I very much respect their right to protest, as if it's just this sort of token element of a democracy that needs to be there, rather than that protest has been fundamental to any meaningful change over the last 20 years.
You've got to punctuate it with questions. Otherwise they switch off.
Well, no, you know. But I've known George now. He goes on one, and then, you know, it's all good stuff.
If you tune in, it is good.
No, it is good stuff. It is. The problem is with it's like in our industry, it's the same thing, right? If we write research, if we don't make our point, everyone's fighting for airtime, right? So, in many ways, it's not just about the points you have to make; it's the way you market them as well, you know.
And I mean, a related point is that I would say sort of 60% probably of propaganda is form rather than content. It's that if you're trying to challenge the status quo, you can only do so by setting the scene of a different worldview that goes against the standard one.
Yeah.
And so if you're making a comment within the mainstream, you can do that sort of within the sort of standard parameters of media narratives. You can make that point quickly and it can be understood. If you're trying to repicture the world and then make the point. Seconds or even 1,000 words for that matter. You know?
Yeah, and I feel too that the press, especially at the start, they kept on saying, okay, so can you explain in 10 words what you're about? And it's like, you know what, guys, this time you're going to have to work a little harder because we can't express what we want in 10 words. And it's not because what we want is invalid, it's because there's more to it. It's not changing the system because the sea is superior. It's just not that simple.
Yeah.
What we're about. Anyway, but I think I have come across Occupy's communication.
I think this.
Okay, that's as vague as you know. It's about communicating.
We talked about this yesterday.
This is Occupy.
We talked about this yesterday. There is no answer. There is no place to which you are going. Right? There is no. If someone says to you, "What do you hope to achieve?" It's not a one-word answer, right? But there are just two types of things in life. There's forward moving and improvement, and there's backward moving, right? And as long as one feels one is moving forward, as long as one feels one's making progress, then I think it's justifiable. In other words, I think what you're doing I don't think what you're doing will change anything, right? But I think you will make things.
It's already changing.
I think no. I was about to say, in terms of a meaningful difference to the way anybody really goes about living their lives. But I think that you will improve things.
That hurts, and I tell you.
I think you will improve things.
No, but
You go.
Okay,
You go first.
thank you.
So improvement, but not.
I think that
fundamental.
That our biggest enemy to what Occupy is kind of trying to do, those 10 points, is not the financial system.
No.
It's not bad press. It's not the police. It's cynicism.
Yeah.
So cynicism, which you have just expressed, is our biggest enemy. So you can't just sit next to two occupiers and say, you are not going to change anything, and expect us not to go,
No.
because it's cynicism. You've got to recognize your own cynicism. If you really want this world to be a better place, you have to recognize it in yourself, because it's in you, it's in every one of us.
You have to go to the mountaintop, you know. I mean, that's why that Martin Luther King speech was one of the most significant things in the 20th century. It's that it was somebody who managed to get to the forefront of the public mind and actually espouse a different vision of the world.
Yeah.
And obviously he had to be shot because he was campaigning against
Activate.
corporate power.
But that's
and all
what it
sorts
is,
of
and
stuff,
we
you know,
also have
which a lot of people
cynicism.
forget in-
No, I wasn't
In our
actually.
text,
Fun
when
enough.
honestly
I
told,
think you
cynicism
weren't.
is
I think you
there.
weren't trying to
I wasn't being cynical. What I was saying is I think that, by the way, when I said you wouldn't change anything, I'm not sure that there's a bill that's passed or there's a concrete conclusion is what I meant. I think you'll improve things, right? In other words, I think that things will get slightly better.
Improve is change.
That's right. Well, that's why we're slightly at cross purposes.
Can I recommend my totally incomprehensible dissertation that I've submitted to the court? Because the point that makes is in terms of the ecological situation we face, we have a very fixed time frame, and no one knows exactly how long that time frame is to turn things around incredibly quickly. I mean, the climate science, the mainstream overly conservative climate science of 5 years ago was saying we need to have carbon emissions in the world peak by 2015, 2017. And we just had a meeting in Durban where they're saying we're not going to do anything until 2020. So, and you know, even the Stern reports, the chief economist of the World Bank, UK government thing, said this is going to be tens of trillions of dollars that is going to be counted in, you know, all sorts of costs to the global economy, including, you know, millions of deaths, etc., hundreds of millions displaced. So, the sense in which we actually it is necessary in the world. Change in a very short time in order to avoid cataclysmic change is something that we all have to try and get our heads around. So that very intuitive idea that you just expressed, which is that as long as things are getting better, then it's okay, is something that we need to understand in a very particular.
Well, I guess sometimes you have to try and bite off more than you can chew in order to make pigeon steps.
Exactly.
If you didn't have as aggressive a stance as you have, then
But
it would take much longer.
It's actually very, very rational and practical. You know, and as I said, this is climate science from 2007. It's inherently conservative because it only really reflects what the computer models have worked out how to include, and a lot of the feedbacks in the system, i.e. the things that feed into each other to make it worse and worse, are not even in that science. So the sense in which it is absolutely necessary that we turn the world economy around on a sixpence. I mean, to go back to what you were saying before,
how do we do that without growth?
So Green New Deal, basically the way I see it is that what capitalism needs by definition, because it's a growth model and money is always lent at interest based on the prediction of problems, and in fact it hasn't happened, is why we're in such trouble at the moment. It's not debt per se, it's debt versus GDP. But so what we need is for capitalism to redeem itself with a last great frontier, which is the Green New Deal, and then we need to have a very careful plan which involves re-democratising the money supply to bring the global economy to a steady state. Economists out there, but it's only going to happen if millions of people across the world get together to shift the economic powers that be that currently dictate
And
policy.
the only thing that stops people doing that is cynicism. Thinking, oh, if I take my money out of this bank and put it in an ethical bank and get, as a consequence, £200-300 less a year, right? it's not going to change anything, and so I won't, because all I'm going to achieve from that is getting 200 to 300 pounds less a year. So I won't do it. But if everybody moved their money out of banks that are unethical into banks that are ethical, so I am told, then there would be a real shift in the confidence that unethical banks have, right?
So what happens if people took money out of their bank accounts? Just funny you should mention this, but I'm working on a scheme, and pledged it as collateral to charities who could then borrow money. So you wouldn't have to give it away, you'd just pledge it. Because in other words, so Barclays won't shut down Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital, right? They won't come and seize possession of Great Ormond Street. But actually what happened to it's actually a true story. They needed 250 million for Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital, and one of my friends, they got to 150 million and they went to the British government, they said, can we have the other 50? And they said, yes, when you've got a fully funded business plan. And they went to 50 very rich people and they said, right, we'll give you $1 million each when you've got a fully funded business plan. So there was a 100 million gap. So because Great Ormond Street raised 25 million a year, right, he eventually persuaded Barclays off their income stream to lend them the 100 million. Barclays went, we'll lend you the 100 million. The British government went, okay, we'll give you the 50. The 50 donors went, we'll give you $51 million. And they never needed the loan they never ever needed the loan. In other words, the campaign's called Do Good, Give Nothing. Right? And what you have to do good, give nothing, or good pledge. And what you do is we all carry on donating to whatever charitable causes we like, but all the billions of dollars that's on the sideline that are in bank accounts, I can put £1 million in a bank account at 1%, pledged as collateral against the charity to give charities the working capital they need to get through the recession.
You're working on that?
Yeah. Written a proper business plan with a member of parliament, and it's a really great idea.
You've got a guy coming to speak this afternoon. You've he was ex-Wall Street. He's an ex-investment banker. What's his name? Speaking at 3 o'clock.
Today?
Yeah. Rodney Schwartz, CEO of Clearly So.
CEO of?
Clearly So, which is a social business enterprise, basically offering social business and enterprises advice, consultants, and what have you, how to get.
It's doing good.
Yeah, how to get. Yeah, how to invest.
Yeah, well, it has to be the way that things are going to work. It has to be a merger between capitalism and the ideals that I think everybody has, not just you guys.
Yeah, we're the only ones that are prepared to be in a tent about them.
And Nick, you'll hear me sort of repeating what I was saying yesterday, but because we have a new audience. But did anyone see the Ian Hislop When Bankers Were Good programme on TV? So I highly recommend that. What he was doing was sort of contrasting these highly philanthropic 19th century bankers, people like the Gurneys, who were Quakers and they were stinking rich. What wasn't mentioned in the programme was probably a lot of that money was basically coming from imperial investments across the world, etc. The narrative of the film was seeming to say, back in the day bankers were good, now they don't seem to be so good. In parentheses, but I think in terms of the actual narrative, by far the most important point in that film was that what it said right towards the end is, and for all this money, it didn't really make any kind of serious dent into Victorian poverty because it was far too systemic, it was far too much driven by the kind of overall economic architecture, and the only thing that really did change things was basically socialist politics in the 20th century that put the provision of those good things that Nick and others believe in into the hands of an empowered government, and a government that was empowered through much more progressive taxation. And so I think where both what Inca and Nick are talking about are kind of very important sort of activist tools, if you like, in the absence of the systematic change we need to, so getting people to shift money from certain bank accounts to others, these create sort of micro pressures in the sort of stream of the economic status quo. Similarly, getting people that do have all this spare money to be doing good things with it is a really, really good idea. But in reality, the only way we're going to change things on anything like the scale required, and especially at the speed required, is by having those systematic shifts. And here the key is what they call the multiplier effect, which is you can get a million people to start behaving like kind of green consumers and trying not to spend their money in certain ways. That will have some not insignificant sort of micro supply chain effects across the world to quite a few 100,000 people maybe. When you get those million people instead, or not necessarily instead, but as well, organising politically to apply pressure at the top of the political system such that you get the rules changed. If you get the rules changed, then suddenly instead of just what happens to a few 100,000 people being different, what happens to tens of millions of people starts being different. And the sort of prisoner's dilemma thing, which I think we all know as human beings we're sucked into, which is that, and not people like yourself that are kind of going against the grain and really put your money where your mouths are generally going to be the exception. The vast majority of people will only do what they see to be the right thing if they know that other people are going to do it.
Yeah.
And by far the easiest way to do that is to get the rules changed so that everyone suddenly has confidence on pain of punishment that other people are going to do the right thing too. And then people go, oh, all right. And it's the whole sort of what they call invidious comparison in social science, that comparing ourselves to what our neighbours have and do is one of the most fundamental human tendencies. And that's why Jesus had that sort of parable about trying to teach people that the less they do that, the better. But in terms of being realistic about human nature, that is how most people tend to behave.
What was it called? That
Invidious comparison. Invidious. So invidia it means neighbour in Latin. So it just means comparing yourself to your neighbours. So if you campaign to get the rules changed, then you can get